psychologist who was
Well, I'm going to be
started to
taking
wonder
in
what I'm doing spending so much
some
time with
paper's
schizophrenics.
notes.
So he sent a stooge over there to ask what was going on in the meetings I was having with schizophrenics. None of them told them anything, and that pissed them off. Now,
I got
so
some new
one
details
patient
here.
who we got rid of the voices,
So
one
I'm
prisoner,
over testing
one of the
now.
chief psychologist stooges came down and cornered him and said, asked him, "What are you doing with Jerry in the office to make the voices go away?" And he goes, "Well, we're just talking, you know." And he didn't tell him anything. He knew what this guy was up to. He didn't tell him anything. So he asked him, "Well, what's he doing?" And he told this guy, he said, "He's helping us, not like you, asshole." So that really pissed him off. Right? So the psychologist said, "Would you be willing to take another MMPI?" So they had a MMPI on him when he came into the prison, which was a valid profile, and it showed that he was psychotic. He was crazy. Right? That's psychology's golden test standard. That's the
This is
gold.
the Myers Briggs
No,
personality.
this is the Minnesota multiphasic personality.
Okay.
That's the most researched instrument. It's the gold standard instrument. You know, it's got a bunch of validity scales. It knows when the person is lying and when they're not, because it's got a bunch of lie scales in it. So he has this patient who recovered. And would you be willing to take another one? And the guy said, "Sure, I'll take another one." So he took it. The profile came out valid, and he came out as not psychotic on their own test. And that really drove them nuts. You know, they're going, "What's he doing? What's he doing?" And then they're going, "He's experimenting with prisoners without departmental permission. We're going to all get fired."
But they never asked you. They went around. They went around you the entire time.
Well, they asked me, and I'm just talking to them like, look, I'm just talking to them. Not doing any of it. We're having conversations. And I wouldn't tell them. I couldn't tell them. They might have gotten fired. And so as each new prisoner recovered, they heard about it, and they were getting more and more frantic. I thought they would be happy. You know, hey, look, you don't have to spend any more money on antipsychotic drugs. These guys are going to go out and be productive people. They're not going to be sick anymore. I thought they would be thrilled. No, they were prancing around like infested demons. It was like they were paranoid. They were scared. They were like, "Oh, he's got to be stopped. He's got to be stopped. We're going to get in trouble with whatever he's doing." So they had an inquisition where they
In fact, that was the word that was just running through my head before you said it.
they had an inquisition, and they said, "Well, we're going to bring you before the medical director for the prison, for that particular prison." And still, the prisoners wouldn't tell them anything, so they really didn't have it. So what they were expecting to do was to goad me into saying something that they could hang me. And what was strange was all these Christians came out of nowhere and said, "This is how you handle an inquisition at the prison. This is what you did. You get yes or no answers. Don't give them any more information than you absolutely have to. You know, don't get hooked. Don't play their games." And I did. That infuriated the chief psychologist even more. You know, so the chief psychologist said, "Well, he's doing something that the prisoners don't need the medications anymore." And the administrator, thinking about costs, he goes, "Well, that's good. We don't have to pay for the thing. Whatever he's doing, great. We don't have to pay for money." He was the only sane one, there. But that pissed off the chief psychologist. And so the head of medical basically told the chief psychologist to let him alone. And he told me, he said, "You listen to what he says. He's your boss. If you defy him, you're going to get fired." Right? So I had to be careful from that point on. And they were watching me like a hawk. So I really had to slow down. I really had to be careful. And then there was this one prisoner. What they did is they transferred me to a Spanish-speaking unit where I really couldn't work with these guys. This stopped me from doing what I was doing because it's helping these guys recover. So the prison is the devil's workshop. Nothing good happened there that didn't get punished. And I think all prisons are like that. They're the devil's territory. Right? So I was working with this one Spanish guy, half spoke English and like spoke some Spanish, and he told them what was going on when they asked him. That went up to the chief psychologist, and he started making my life miserable. You know,
Start a file, basically.
started a file, started a file. Because I knew what the voices did, I knew how they acted. I was able to diagnose schizophrenics quicker and understand how dangerous they were far better than any of the others did, based on what the voices were doing, what they were saying, how much control they had, that kind of stuff. So there was one guy, he was on the unit I was working with, and he was psychotic. His voices were telling him to kill another prisoner because that other prisoner was doing something to him that he didn't like. So the voices were getting stronger and stronger. I felt that he was going to act on it. He was going to kill that other prisoner or at least harm him. So what this psychologist did is they had an agreement. The psychiatrist was working another job. He wanted the psychologist to cover for him, to have everybody lined up who needed to be seen by him so he could do that quickly and work his other job. So the psychologist, the chief psychologist, was in cahoots with him. And the psychiatrist was getting dinged for prescribing too many medications. Right? So the psychiatrist and the chief psychologist were in cahoots. And what the chief psychologist did was assigned another of his stooges to the medical unit to turn back anybody with a psychotic diagnosis and re-diagnose them with some other diagnosis that wouldn't take antipsychotic drugs. Because the psychiatrist was getting in trouble with the chief medical officer for spending too much money on antipsychotic drugs for prisoners. Right? So basically, what this guy was doing, he was working for the chief psychologist as a stooge. You'd send somebody in there who's hearing voices, who was psychotic, threatening other prisoners, and this guy would give him another diagnosis and send him back and say, no, he's an antisocial personality disorder, something like that. Okay? So I sent this guy back again. I said, okay, his symptoms are getting worse, and I'm filling up these medical records with these symptoms, the threats that the psychotic guy's making, full psychiatric workups, and the guy sent him back again. No, he's an antisocial personality disorder. Right? The guy's getting worse. He's threatening this guy. He's getting in his face. So I sent him back again. You know, this is all the evidence, like 3 or 4 pages in the medical record of this guy becoming increasingly dangerous by the day. Right? He sent him back again. He's an anti-personality disorder. He's not psychotic. 3 days later, he stabbed another inmate 13 times. I was so furious. I could not go to work because I was afraid I would beat the crap out of the chief psychologist. I was afraid I would just kick his ass. I was so mad. So when he found out I wrote all that stuff, he freaked. He totally freaked because that would have cost him his job probably, or he would have been in a lot of trouble. And so would have the psychiatrist. So he assigned another psychologist to read every medical record every time I wrote in the medical record. And he had her in there with me, made it clear that she would be watching every entry I made into every medical record on any psychotic patient, and that I would have to change it to what she said. And I said, basically, I'll play your game until somebody is going to get hurt, and then I'm going to do what I have to do. And that time came within a few months where I felt a psychotic patient who wasn't on medication was going to hurt another inmate. And I wrote it up, and boy, he went nuts. And they really went after me then. So I looked at how much time I had that I could retire. I bought back some time, and I hit the ejection seat and flew out of there.
What happened to this guy?
Well, he's an egotistical sociopath. He made it up to Phoenix in the Department of Corrections as the chief psychologist for the entire state. And they just ate him alive up there. They ate him alive. He got sick and he had to quit and go work for the Social Security Administration. So at that point, I had no doubt that these voices were negative entities. They didn't like what I was doing. And the next time they hit me was I started doing interviews with a fake name. And the first one was with Robert Stanley. And I said, okay, I'll do an interview with you, but you need to use another name for me, another whatever you call it. So he put down, well, this is Dr. J. And he published that all over the place. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, Robert, I'm not a doctor. And he goes, oh, that doesn't matter. You're a doctor to me. They got that all over the place. So here I started speaking out about this stuff. And then Freeman Fly, one of the biggest podcasters here in the United States, asked me to speak with him. Okay. So this was like, okay, it made me real nervous because he was a big one. Yeah, like a week before I was about to speak to him, I was down in Mexico, and a staph infection erupted in my right shoulder. I didn't even know a staph infection could erupt anywhere except in your throat, you know? And it got so bad, I went to bed the night before, my arm was completely normal. I woke up in the morning and I couldn't move it. It was extremely painful, and it was getting worse. You know? So I wasn't going to go to a hospital in Mexico. After I got back to the U.S., went to the emergency room. They had me in surgery the next day. It would have killed me. You know, a staph infection in my right shoulder. I was on the internal antibiotics for 6 months. It would have killed me. I have no doubt the dark forces did that. You know, the staph infection. I didn't injure that shoulder. I didn't do anything to that shoulder.
You mentioned another patient that you had, a woman, and she'd gone into the emergency room and she saw some things. What kind of things did she see in the emergency room, and why is that kind of significant?
She was interesting. One of the things I learned in the emergency room is they don't want you to spend any more time than you have to get that person out of the emergency room. Right. They don't want you doing any kind of therapy. They don't want you helping these guys. They want these patients out of the emergency room so they can put in medical patients. The doctors don't know what to do with psychiatric patients. They have no idea what to do. They just want psychology to get them out, get them somewhere else, and free up the emergency room beds. Okay? So with everything I knew, I was kind of thinking, what could I tell these psychotic patients who may or may not see? So I only see them in the emergency room. I make the diagnosis and I determine, okay, they going in, they going out, they coming into the hospital, they going to a mental health clinic, wherever the places we can get them to. Okay? Chances are I'll never see them again. Right? So I was thinking, what information, what piece of information can I give them that would help them the most in the short period of time that I would be with them? And that piece of information was that the voices are parasites. Now, when I brought that up to these patients, the voices went nuts. They went crazy. They went absolutely crazy. It was very clear that they didn't want their victims to know that they were feeding off them. You know? Mm-hmm. So, like, if you had a leech on you, you wouldn't just sit there and look at it. You would do something about it, right? Right. Even when I was in the state hospital, it's like the energy. Okay. So one thing I noticed, there's a one-to-one correspondence between the voices showing up and the patient's energy level dropping to almost nothing. Mm-hmm. So what I did when I was in the state hospital, I just kind of did a quick, dirty experiment. 1 to 10 scale. How much energy did you have before the voices started on a 1 to 10 scale? And how much energy do you have after the voices leave? And I gave that to scores of schizophrenic hearing voices. Right? Consistently, they had more energy before the voices came and consistently less energy after the voices came. Right? So the voices were doing something with their energy. They were draining their energy. Right? But when I asked the patient, I'd say, okay, if you had more energy before the voices came and much less energy after they came, where was your energy going? I mean, there's a one-to-one correlation between the voices showing up and their energy level. It was consistent. It was a consistent correlation. And I'd ask them, well, You didn't use that energy, did you? You go, no, no, I was laying in bed all night just tossing and turning. And I said, well, what did it feel like after the voices left? They said, it felt like I was working in the hot sun all day digging ditches. That's how drained I was. And that kind of response was consistent. So I'd ask them, well, where did that energy go? If you didn't use it, where did it go? Their consistent answer was, I don't know. So I would say, if you stuck your hand in the fire 100 times, and every time you stuck your hand in the fire, you got burned, what would be burning? They had no trouble with the fire. Oh, yeah, the fire burning. Well, over the last 10 years, you've been hearing voices. Every time they've come, and this probably tens of thousands of times, you heard the voices after they left. You were drained. Where do you think your energy went? Well, I don't know. They were being blocked from realizing that. Some of them would go, very few of them, they would go, oh, voices took it? I go, yeah, yeah, voices. So they were draining the energy. And that response that I got from when I read that paragraph from the shaman, where he was actually saying that the voices took it and that whatever it was started crackling around my office after that. They do not want their victims to know that they are draining their energy. Okay? So that is one of the most helpful things I could give these people in the emergency room. But I had to be very careful with who I told that to, because if they went to one of the psychiatrists, or one of the nurses or one of the doctors and said, "Oh, well, the psych says these things are entities and they're draining me," I'd be screwed again. So I had to be very careful. Okay, with her, she knew what the voices were already, and she knew what they were. She didn't know they were parasites. So when
you also said something interesting is that they told her to put sigils or signs all around her house. Is that right? She had an abortion, I think, when she was 16, and then she felt terrible about it, and then she started putting symbols all around her house that she heard from the voices. Can you say more about that?
Well, I don't remember that detail. I haven't read that story in years. I sent it out because I know it's a good story. It's a true story. What I do remember is her coming in. Okay, so she was pacing back and forth frantically. So she'd come in voluntarily. She'd run out of her meds. She went to the mental health center. They wouldn't give her any more medication because she missed some appointments. So here she is, psychotic as bedbug, on the streets, getting more and more aggravated, more and more agitated. She comes in and she's pacing up and down in the psych annex, and making noises and doing these kung fu moves. And then she got into a face-to-face argument with this big black guy, and she wasn't backing down from him, and he was crazy too. So the psychiatric nurse is saying, "You better do something about this quick." Okay, so I get her in, and we're sitting in the interview room. There's a camera there, but there's no sound. But so I can ask them anything I want. Nobody's listening. But they are monitoring that camera. And she told me, she said, "I've never saw more evil spirits before than I saw when I was waiting in the medical unit in the emergency room." You know? And I said, "Well, tell me about it." And she said, "I watched this one doctor give a patient a diagnosis. There's a bad diagnosis." And she said, "I saw black codes coming out of his mouth and going into the patient." And she said, if the patient believed what he said, they would get whatever he said it was. And I went, whoa, that got my attention. It was like, that's interesting. So I started talking to her, and I didn't know whether I'd see her again. So I asked her, "Are you hearing your voices right now?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, I'm going to tell," because I felt I could trust her. She knew what the voices were. She knew that they were dangerous. I said, "I'm going to tell you something. If you're not hearing them right now, you're going to be hearing them screaming and howling in about 2 minutes." I said, "I'm not going to stand in your way. If you need to leave, the door is open. You don't have to stay here. I'm not going to block you." Go out, walk around. I'll get back to you. I'm not going to get you in trouble. I'm not going to stick the hospital police on you. I'm not going to, nothing. You just go cool off and you come back here when you're ready. Okay? So I told her about the voices, and I told her about, the fire, and that the voices were parasites. Okay? As soon as I told her that, she went nuts. She started jumping around. She got up out of her chair. She started pacing. I said, leave, go. She ran out. She tried to get into the bathroom. She couldn't get into the bathroom. So she started going nuts and walking around, pacing aggressively around the psychiatrist. The nurse comes in. She goes, "What'd you do to her?" I said, "No, leave her alone. She'll be back in a few minutes. She'll be all right." Right? So when she pulled out, she came back in. And she realized that the voices were parasites. But she didn't know that before that. And they went nuts when she heard that. They didn't like that information. So she started telling me about what happened. She said, "I was molested when I was a child." Okay? And she said, "My daughter was also sexually molested." And I said, "Well, did they catch the guy who did it?" And she said, "No, he's dead." And I asked her, I said, "Well, what happened to him?" She just cracked a sly smile, and that said it all. You know, she had killed the guy, but she wasn't going to, clearly, she wasn't going to admit it. So that's where the black codes came from. I thought that was a real interesting story. And I got more stories like that. I mean, there's a lot of stories like that. I was going to do a book on it. It's like then I got so busy with the private practice and the interviews, and it's kind of like I'm just overwhelmed now.
Yeah, you should write the book. You should absolutely write the book. And then you'll have something to promote. I mean, you already have one book to promote, but you can promote the other.
Take so much time. Yeah, I'm overwhelmed with clients. I'm backed up till June now.
It's a good problem to have, though, right? It's a good problem to have.
Well, it's almost like a full-time job though now. And this mace therapy works so well that it's like if it doesn't get rid of the voices, it gets rid of what they feed off of. And
let's talk really quick about that.
Results.
So is that typically what the solution is, this mace therapy, or are there other things that people can do if they're starting to get plagued with these things?
Well, to tell you the truth, other than the exorcism, I mean, I've been waiting for something to come along that was actually effective and did permanent results. So what these negative entities feed off of is trauma. They're constantly setting off trauma. And then it's almost like they wait where that negative identity is, and when it gets set off, they pour gasoline on the fire and just make it worse. So they feed off of that negative emotional energy and that trauma. And if anything that resembles that trauma happens in the person's psychic sphere, it sets off that negative emotional energy, and they get upset. So it's critical to drain that trauma down to nothing, where it doesn't affect the person. Then they have much less to feed off of. In a lot of cases, it may not get rid of the voices, but it will make them much better because they're not as upset. There's not as much to feed off of. And there's a lot of things they can do to fight back against the voices.
I think you mentioned prayer was part of it, right?
Yep, prayer is one of those. They have two guardian angels. They can't help them unless they ask. These voices are negative and energies. They're negative spirits. They're which the Bible would call demons. And you look at what's happening today in the Christian church, they don't concentrate on demons driving all this bad stuff that's going on. But if you got this list of traits, you can get it from my website at jerrymarzinski.com. This list of patterns. There's a one-to-one correspondence between what these psychotic voices are telling psychotic patients and what is coming over the mainstream media from the politicians right now. It's the exact same stuff on a macroscopic scale. You look at it. What's coming across the news is negative. It's anti-religious. They're burning down churches in Canada. Church attendance is going down. They foster and create negative emotion. You turn on the TV, it's all negative. You're going to die. We're going to get blown up by atomic bomb. Rockets are going to be hit soon. Energetically drains the victim. That constant negativity drains the victim. You know, they won't be ignored. They're coming over the radio. They're coming over the television. They're coming over YouTube. They're coming over the computer. They won't be ignored. You know? I mean, you go look at these 23 patterns. These politicians are demonically possessed.
I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. I think our
they're doing.
the entire system.
Ukrainians killed 600,000, over half a million, and they're giving $600 billion or whatever to kill more. Their army's decimated. It's decimated. Now they're blowing up things in Russia. These are technicians who are doing. These are U.S. and NATO technicians. It isn't Ukrainians running these high-tech rockets. These are mercenaries.
And the other thing too is these politicians are putting us in these situations, and they're not preparing for the blowback, right? So if you're picking a fight with the Russians, right, we're not mobilizing. We're not producing more. So if we get pulled in, the first salvo of Americans, once they run out of ammunition, we're in real trouble. Like we're running out of ammunition fast. We're already running out of ammunition, but they're not thinking ahead. They're not making considerations. Even the sanctions. There were certain sanctions that made sense that worked within the traditional order, but there were other sanctions that basically just, oh, you have dollars, what's the currency you have is denominated in dollars. We're just going to change the rules so that you're disadvantaged by holding dollars.
And that's why
what's happening. Yeah, you start having de-dollarization. It's like they set up this whole stream of events unwittingly, or maybe wittingly, to defang the United States in terms of like being a global protector of. And I understand the motivations of trying to prevent the slaughter of Ukrainians. But the intent was noble to begin with, but we kept pushing NATO east. We kept doing it, right. And I'm like, that's not to like what the Russians did was horrific and horrible, and they deserve to be punished for it. But like, we have to acknowledge that our politicians had a hand in this mess.
They're way out of hand. They're way out of hand. They're crazy as bedbugs. They're crazy as bedbugs. Matter of fact, they were borrowing 105mm ammunition from South Korea because they didn't have them. So now NATO purchased a factory that makes 105mm ammunition.
And they don't tell you. You don't hear on the media about all the ammunition plant fires in the United States. Have you heard any about that? No, there's plenty of them. Yeah, there's plenty of them.
Yeah, there's
nothing still not. Yeah. Well, wouldn't you? I mean, so you don't hear it. Nobody sees. Nobody is told what's going on. People are just. And meanwhile, we're sending billions over, over to Ukraine to fight a war, whatever, 3,000, 5,000, however many thousand miles away. Meanwhile, our border is wide open. Wide open.
Right on. And look at the schools are falling apart, roads are falling apart, the infrastructure is falling apart. They can care less about the United States population.
It was an absolute pleasure, my friend, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay, good peace.
If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe. And also hit the notification button so you'll be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support me, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books.
Now, what should we listen to? Jonas by Sounds interesting.
Kate's team was taking on a whole bunch of free stuff. Oh, Doom Slayer. I don't know who you are. Just a data point. So you're gonna see that toward the end of this video. Also, I didn't put it in the description box, but at the end of this video, if you are interested in learning more about someone doing to want to perceive this physical as just an altered state of related context can answer for all the enigmas of the ancient world. This was my promise 6 years ago. I was going to bring data to the table that no one had ever considered, and that this is going to be evidence that we are in a mathematical construct, because none of this can be true that we have unveiled unless we live in some type of artificial reality, at least virtual reality. And for lack of appropriate frames of reference, we have to say simulation, we have to say virtual, we have to say augmented, we have to say artificial, when it may be none of those things. It's just not physical. And that maybe everything in the material that we perceive as physical is just an altered state of spirituality that's separate from us, and that we are more to source, and that we have to wear a part of the very environment we're in. We call it an avatar. The avatar is made up of materials of the construct, and it's how we flow through the construct and experience the construct, and yet remain absolutely independent of it. So, two principles. Let me share my screen before we start this presentation, so you can at least see what I'm talking about. So, the world operates on two principles. If an observer does not think about what he or she observes, then the world is very real, explainable place, and all so-called mysteries merely need any type of explanation in order for the individual to believe in this explainable world. This is the collective programming, with all the types of operable dungeon programming reinforcing that soul's desire for an explainable world. This is the value of establishment education for organizations like NASA and the publishing industry that reinforce this false paradigm. This is collective programming. We call it dungeon programming all the time, with all its feedback loops, self-perpetuating belief systems. This is one principle of our reality, of this construct. Here's the other. The other principle operable here involves the observer who pays attention and thinks. For this individual, the construct provides this independent soul an infinite amount of evidence that this is indeed a construct, a false reality, and these evidences promoted deeper thinking, an awareness that the environment is manufactured, and this soul awakens to the fact that such a scenario is actually liberating, self-empowering, and profoundly connected to the soul's identity. So, these are the two principles operating in our reality. The majority of souls in this experience, all sharing this experience together, have all basically defaulted to the first principle. They see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, and therefore the construct gives them things to smell, things to see, things to hear, things to touch. A believable, organized reality that doesn't shake them to the core. It reciprocates with the exact amount of energy they expend in analyzing their environment. Their environment reciprocates and gives them the actual stimuli that perpetuates the idea that they're in
a world that they've been told that they're in. There is no real investigation. But for the
Never
other
did spell before.
souls
And
in my
Batik.
world,
So
these souls also taste,
and
hear, smell, touch,
smell
and see. But it's not enough. They also think about what they're seeing. They think about what they're smelling. They think about what they're touching. This is a whole new level of experiencing the environment. When the construct realizes there's cogitation behind the act of reciprocation, it begins to show that soul the cracks in the holosphere. And this is what our case has been about from the very beginning, showing you the reason why the archaic data has been so mind bending and so profound to so many people is simply because it's always been there and none of it was difficult to find. It's always been there. All we had to do was see with different eyes. All we had to do was think about the things that we have heard about the historical record. Think about the things that we see in the sky. Think about phenomena rather than just experience it. And by thinking about it, we are casting forth a spiritual energy, and the construct is reciprocating by feeding that spirit the truth. This is what this presentation is about. So there is no middle ground. A soul in this world either accepts that they are the victim of their environment and therefore residing in an environment over which they have no control, or they reject that and they realize that they are something more. And the more they process the phenomena of the environment, the more they realize that not only are they independent of it, but they even have the ability to control much of what they experience in that artificial environment. So I asked you at the beginning of this video, which soul are you? A slave to the program who believes they're free, or a soul passing through the construct toward a greater destiny? I know my answer. I know my answer. But it was absolutely necessary to put souls into a very believable world. That's what this is. It is a very believable world. The diurnal system, day and night, is like the heartbeat of this reality. And it comes with its own phenomena. In the daytime, we have this great yellow, burning disk. We have the sun. At nighttime, we have the moon. The moon does traverse the daytime sky, though, because it has a totally different momentum across the sky. And we find out the stars don't just move across the sky, they move in an arc. That arc shows there is a polar center. When we move across the sky, we're always equidistant every night from that polar center. And we get the idea from the motion of the sky that we must be on something that's spinning. It's a very believable world. This world has weather conditions that are equally believable. It has terrain of all different types to get us to believe that this world has a very interesting history. It has insects, all kinds of denizens from basically microscopic. The whole insta, the end of the world of entomology is actually rife with organisms for which many we have not discovered yet. So the animal kingdoms as well. And the world is so believable that even when we investigate the terrain, we find the evidence of past programming, past programmed ecospheres that contain the residual of biological organisms that were themselves living in previous versions of the construct. It is all very, very believable, and it allows for those that are inside the construct to formulate theories to basically guesstimate how it's possible that we have these life forms trapped in stone, how it's possible that we have these amazing diverse weather conditions from arid deserts to arid polar regions, both of them equally dry. One of them freezing and you cannot live in. The other one's so hot that you'll die very quickly, but they're both arid. Then we have whole areas that are absolutely humid. So much diverse weather. It's all very believable. Everything about the programming of the world is designed for you to believe in it. Even the predator versus prey ecosphere, it is very believable. So what makes it so believable is that it is order tempered with chaos. We see violence as chaotic. This whole predator versus prey phenomenon that's going on in the animal kingdom, in the insect kingdoms, and in the corporate America world, or basically the corporate world period all over the world. It's predator versus prey everywhere. But that's just an extension of order and chaos. It's what makes it so believable. If it was always perfectly ordered, it would not be believable to a free thinking soul. A free thinking soul, just like the Matrix movie, there was a good drop in the Matrix movie when Neo was talking to the architect, and the architect told Neo, we built for you a golden age society. We made for you a perfect utopian environment, but you rejected the program. You're talking about as a race, human race. You rejected the program. It wasn't believable. So we created a world of punishment, of order and chaos. We created a world where you could experience pain at multiple levels if this you believe you accepted the program. Huge drop in the Matrix movie. To those who have fallen prey to the first principle, and they believe this world at face value, and they believe everything the controllers of this world continue to educate them on. They believe the NASA version of our reality. They believe the junior high, high school, the collegiate uh, material about ice ages and geological columns, and they believe and they've invested their faith in things like carbon 14 dating and potassium argon. They actually think a tree grows one ring a year, and they invest their faith in dendrochronology. Don't even realize, don't even realize that in 4 or 5 years of a dry spell, a tree won't even put a single ring. They believe that all these things that we have to accept to be true, to accept relative dating methods, such as potassium argon, is the absolute complete stability of the breakdown of those isotopes without any outside interference at all for them to be accurate. And these people still believe that this is true, and it's all completely arbitrary. Those who have defaulted to the first principle reality are those who don't recognize disparate material, such as many physicists have documented the history of our world in gamma ray saturations. These unique saturations of gamma radiation that's found in our rocks and our soil materials that can be measured completely, absolutely collapses the whole entire paradigm of isotopic dating methods, the relative dating methods that rely on this radioactive decay model from parent elements to daughter elements. And even though they've all been disproven and disproven in many infallible ways, the collective still default to these as accurate dating systems because they believe in the geologic call them. They believe in the uniformitarian, the evolutionary education they've been given. All they need is a model to believe in to perpetuate the world that they've already accepted to be true. Charles Fort said it best, Book of the Damned, 1919. It's almost as if there's an occult force that guides over the minds of men, and anytime something unusual or anomalous happens, these men just appear and provide enough, just enough story to get people to believe in that narrative. Basically, to take them away from the idea of something very unusual and unique just happened. It could have never happened in the world that you accepted to be true. So the first principle souls are those of the collective. We all know them. The people that are glued to ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox. They even think Fox is different, or they used to. I don't know about now. But CNN, yeah, every bit of it mainstream. It's mainstream media because they're giving you the mainstream version of the world that people buy into. They believe that. They believe that they're scientists. They believe your testimonials. They believe all that. And then because so many souls have been waking up in the past 20, 30 years, that our controllers had to prepare for the citizen journalist. They had to prepare for the free thinking individual, highly informed soul. So they created these alt media personalities who the collective that start to wake up fall into the dungeon programming of the alt media personalities like Russell Brand, like so many others. He's just one person. There's so many others that are they're gatekeeping. But people actually believe they're a part of the alt media. They're literally telling them the truth when they're a part of the control apparatus. It's just a different level. It's more sophisticated because they're not worried about the collective. The collective of all have already pigeonholed themselves into a reality from which they can't escape. But those that are waking up have other traps laid out for them, like Tucker Carlson, like Alex Jones, like so many others, like Joe Rogan now. Yeah. Joe Rogan may not personally be a gatekeeper, but isn't he? Because every guest he has is basically gatekeeping themselves. So we have all media now taking completely over, and all these massive accounts that are nothing but extensions of the collective programming. They are first principle souls. That's it. So we have these cracks in the holosphere that begin to wake up people. 9/11 was a crack in the holosphere for a lot of people. COVID-19 in 2020 and 2021 was another crack in the holosphere for a lot of people. But for those who are awake, they understand the things they see in the sky are just that. It's a show. No longer believing in the speed of light. No longer believing in the Newtonian model of the universe. No longer believing in the Einsteinian psion version of physics. These souls see with their eyes and they think with their minds and they understand that the sun could not possibly be 93 million miles away. It's not possible because the entire historical record is rife with solar anomalies that could have never happened if the sun was that far away. It must be local. The moon could not possibly be 239,000 miles away and cause the events that it's caused in the historical record. It's not possible. In archaics, we have shown so many examples of solar and lunar anomalies that could have only happened if these things that we see in the sky are local and not hundreds of thousands and millions of miles away. The awakened soul will realize that the sky is basically holographic. It is a stellar sphere. It is not an accurate representation of the heavens. It's something else. Who knows? We could be looking at the inside of a toroidal field inside a vast superconstruction like a Dyson shell. We don't know Because like the Russians published widely, we've never been outside the atmosphere. They knew NASA was lying, never went to the moon, but then again, they were on board with the deception as well. So to the awakened soul, we realize that the stellosphere is an illusion, it's covering something else. And we know that there are many mysteries that are inexplicable to first principle souls. But to awaken the souls, we find that many constructual phenomena are actually governed by something that we perceive from the inside of the construct as orb activity. Missing ships, Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Triangle phenomenon, human disappearances, 411 cases, electromagnetic storms, or strange auroras, the inside of typhoon and tornado funnel, all have been documented as having glowing orbs inside them. Glowing orbs have been seen inside of tsunamis. They appear in the air during intense earthquake activity. They have been seen going in and out of volcanoes just as they were erupting. We don't know what they are, but these orbs have been seen and associated to all this phenomena. One of the strangest phenomena in the world is aggregates because they contain many geometrical and amazing, in 2 dimensions, they contain 3-dimensional data. And I've showed this on my channel by showing you what crop circles look like in 3 dimensions as opposed to the 2 dimensions that we see them in the corn and barley fields, in the wheat fields. I've also shown you the videos that orbs are making those patterns. So to a first principle soul, all they had to do was watch British Broadcasting Company, BBC, and watch 2 morons with tennis rackets on their boots walk in a circle with a string on a loop and do a crop circle. And they just mash the corn down, 2 guys walking in a circle with a rope on a stick in the middle, and they called it a crop circle. But that method would have never made the aggregates that are being made since 1996. But those 2 guys were necessary. Those 2 guys gave the first principle souls the information they desperately wanted so they didn't have to entertain all the other anomalies. It gave them their dismissive power. That's what first principle souls always want. They just want an explanation so they can shelve the phenomena and not have to deal with it. These souls are not ready to move on. They belong in this construct and will be recycled back until they awaken. These are the souls that suffer during the conversion field episodes. The nodal apertures and all the different timelines that when they coalesce, creating conversion fields, the awakened souls call those exodus events. The first principle souls call those cataclysms. It is all a matter of perspective, because how you see the world literally, literally forges for you how the world will deal with you at the ingress and the egress points. The convergence fields are the key to all the phenomena, all the edits, all the resets, all the exodus events, the missing populations, the new amazing texts that suddenly appear in the field when they're ancient texts, but we don't have any records that we even had copies of. The convergence fields are the key. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's the guys with the tennis rackets tied to their boots. This is what first principle souls seek. First principle souls seek to know, well, the moon must be real because we sent astronauts to it in the Apollo program. That's all they need. They don't need to know that the original Apollo photo stills of 1969 they're just outside the frame that was actually taken. They're in the extra perimeter on the film. We see tables, double shadows on the moon, flags waving, and hundreds of cuts as if they're acting. How many hundreds of times do you need an astronaut to walk over the same area to find it to get the effect you're looking for? But they don't need to see all that. All they need is somebody in authority to tell them that something is true. Therefore, they can live in their comfortable bubble. They can stay in their cocoon because they're scared. First principles souls are scared to death of finding out that they are not who they thought they were. That's the difference between a first principle soul and an awakened soul. The awakened soul realizes, man, I don't belong here. This world isn't real. I didn't deserve any of the things that are happening in my life. I'm a stranger here. I'm a sojourner. Things do not make sense, and I am not like any of them. That's the awakened soul. Sometimes being awakened is also tantamount to being traumatized. But still, you're not a first principle soul. A first principle soul is absolutely in love with the very chains that keep them in the construct. So we have evidence. Thank you, Shirley, and anybody else who donated. I can't keep up with the chat. I just saw that pop up. The, the evidence that we're in a construct actually comes from the fossil record. Not all the evidence, but some good evidence comes from the fossil record. We see evidence of a program to shut down. It's inexplicable. We've talked about this many times in our cases. 4 videos that address this. Maybe my moderators for new people will post the last one on the Medusa effect. But the fossil record shows us that all the caterpillars and butterflies and beetles and doodlebugs and roaches and centipedes, millipedes, all different types of species of spider, all kinds of flies, fruit flies, gnats, fireflies, mosquito eaters, all kinds of insects and arachnids that are in your backyard today are also found in 200-million-year-old strata. And yet, all the dinosaur fossils are in between, in different layers, never in the same layers. They're all in different layers spread all over the world. But the insects that we have today are in our backyard. It's like somebody shut down the whole scene and everything flash froze. Bivalves, mollusks in 3D, all different types of marine and aquatic creatures from deep underneath the ocean. Jellyfish, all different species of jellyfish have been found fossilized. And they're not just fossilized, they're fossilized in 3D, meaning they turn to stone as they were flowing through water. Typical thing. How does that happen? The Medusa effect is very interesting, but it happens in the entire world. Life forms from the highest mountaintops to the deepest ocean beds all flash froze at the exact same time. For that event to have happened, and the evidence of that event happening all over the world means the entire world died. Not one life form could have survived that. Whole world died. If it gets so cold that geothermal heat can't even keep ocean beds a mile underneath the surface of the sea from turning to solid ice, encasing these jellyfish and these bivalves and all these fish in the middle of giving birth to other fish, all these fish in the middle of swallowing another fish, the whole world instantly flash froze. That is perfect evidence of a system shut down. Somebody flipped off the switch. Now, it would be a different scenario if none of these life forms continued, and that today we had totally different species of insects, totally different fish, totally different reptiles, totally different amphibians, but that's not the case. It's not the case at all. The frogs, salamanders, lizards, snakes, turtles of this fossil record from a flash frozen period are the same ones in our creeks and ponds and streams today. So somebody flipped off the switch. And when somebody turned the switch back on, it was after a period where we had these gigantic reptiles and amphibians. We call them dinosaurs. They were all over the world at the same time as megafauna, at the same time as marsupials were used. We had all this going on. The whole world was like a jungle. And then all of a sudden, all the same, all the same spiders, dragonflies. Oh yeah, I've got pictures on my channel of fossilized butterflies and moths, their wings perfectly intact and turned to stone. Every insect of the ancient world, of the Cambrian period, of this hundreds of millions of years ago, in your backyard alive today. Somebody flipped the switch back on and brought all those life forms back to the table because there could have never been a continuum. The whole world flash froze. And this is a data point for simulation theory. So these programmed convergences that we have found them because of conundrums, because the study of chronology, looking at ancient structures and understanding that many of these stone structures from the ancient world are four-dimensional calendars. And once you understand that, you get what we call chronotexture. These are programmed convergences. This is when there's an exchange of information, there's a copying, there's a modification of pre-existing data in one field, and the modifications are made by the convergence of a second field. So we're in the terrarium. This is the terrasphere. We call it Earth. We're on the Earth plane. Get the idea of being on a planet out of your head. We're on the Earth plane, and the entire sky is simulated. You are in some type of spiritual biogram. It's very sophisticated. It's very believable, but it's willing to show you the cracks in the holosphere if you just look. When we study the Phoenix phenomenon, which is one of the hallmarks of the archaic research, we find that it is significantly attached to the pulse of the construct itself, the fine structure constant, which links all the physics constants together. So we know the Phoenix phenomenon, which occurs every 138 years in four different orders of magnitude, as we've documented. The last time was 1902, which was second magnitude. The Phoenix phenomenon is when new materials show up in the construct. It's when men and materials are removed from the construct. New phenomena occurs. So it's always attended with some type of really unusual red rain, red mud, and red dust resurfacing. It happens all over the world. There's a red star that appears in the sky. And sometimes that red star actually gets so large it looks like a great fiery red dragon. This is how it's described in the historical record over and over and over again. It is described as the typhon, as the phoenix. But there's another phenomenon called Nemesis X. It has a totally independent history and chronology attached to it. In Phoenix and Nemesis X, just like the dark satellite, which is a third reset protocol, they have predictive value because of knowing every time they've appeared in the past. When those fields came in contact with the field of our world, the terrasphere, when the Phoenix convergence field overlays the terrasphere, it's the tertiary field where all the magic happens. It's when the Phoenix field overlays portion, and we know that this is by orders of magnitude. We know that there's a very small field convergence creating a tertiary field in a first magnitude Phoenix occurrence. But 138 years later, there is a much stronger overlay. That field convergence actually covers a much wider area of our world, of our plane. The third is catastrophic, but it's only catastrophic for about half of our plane. This is a third magnitude Phoenix convergence. That's 2040. In the month of May of 2040, that's the one we're waiting on. And by far the worst, which is total field convergence inversion, total overlay, causing an absolute systemic reset of the terrasphere where we are, is the fourth magnitude Phoenix event. That's not till 2178. That's a good way off. In 2040, we're already looking at some harrowing stuff for half of the world. But anyway, Genesis X is on a different chronology, but it too has its convergence fields, which explain all the exchanges of information in the ancient world and bringing forth of new cultures, new races of humans, and new life forms. Whatever Genesis X is, it's not like Phoenix. Phoenix does not bring biological materials. Phoenix brings soil and all the things that biological materials need to thrive. It brings moisture. Phoenix is also Typhon, the bringer of water, the bringer of
This
flow.
is washable ink.
And as Phoenix is the bringer of soil and ash, it's the bringer of volcanism, like volcanic surface. But not Nemesis X. Nemesis X brings life and death, a perfect balance. And then the dark satellite brings rulers. And sometimes those rulers are what we want. In a lot of old traditions, they're referred to as the seven sages, the seven giants, the seven titans, the seven Anunnaki, the seven kings, the seven brothers, the seven patriarchs, the seven regions. It depends on the seven buildings. Depends on what culture and what time period. But the seven are widely known all over the world. So these convergence fields, they bring these programming edits, these very unusual events only in the tertiary fields. In the tertiary fields are only the points of contact between our realm, the terrasphere, and whatever the point of contact is. Is it Phoenix every 138 years in four orders of magnitude, or is it worse every 792 years? The Nemesis X plane overlays some of our plane, and it too is in orders of magnitude of 1, 2, and 3. We have a 3 coming up in November 2026. Totally independent chronology. For those new to my channel and you think I'm just talking some really weird, just taking it freestyling stuff, in the conversation will tell you that there are immense chronological data sets, whole published books worth of data that confirm this 138 and 792 year sequencing of these convergence fields. This isn't anything I'm making up in this video. So it is by study of history. First principle souls will always accept the watered down versions that is presented to them because first principle souls are worried about other things. They're worried about the material. They're worried about the avatar. They're not worried about the immortality. The awakened souls, those who realize that they don't belong here, hunger first for the information that shows them that they're right, that this world is not what we think. One of the greatest ways to understand that this world is a complete falsification is the study of history. In Archaics, we have documented amazing cross-calendrical parallels. And we have been led to believe that calendars are human institutions. And yet, when we find these incredible repetitive although we discuss them in cipher, I am now applying it to the historical record because I've I've been finding these. I just never applied the research. But they're isolinear projections, and they're amazing because they're everywhere in the historical record. The isometric projections give us an event in the historical record that measures similar events going forward and backward in time, showing the structure of space-time. While it is flowing in palindromic sequences, and I have given numerous examples from the historical record of this exchange of information between the future and the past going on. And the only way that it's possible is that history is not a linear construction. If it indeed is not only cyclical, but it is laden with epicycles within those cycles, almost like history is a series of circles that unfold in a Mandelbrot pattern. It is amazing. But this is what the awakened soul will find. When you go through the archaics data, there's no way to conclude otherwise. The cross-cylindrical parallels are absolute evidence of the structuring of time and space, and that there's an exchange of information between the exact timing in the construct when something happens and whatever the event phenomena is that's happening in the construct. It is a self-referencing pattern across multiple calendars. It's amazing. But that could not happen in a real reality, not in a Newtonian universe, but it can happen in a structured mathematical reality. Palindromic sequencing couldn't happen in a physical world. It's too ordered, it's too precise. It shows that events are not random. It can happen in a mathematical construct. Isolinear projections could never happen in a real. It would be coincidence, but to find so many of them shows too many coincidences exhibits no coincidence at all. Therefore, reality is a it's an experience within some type of arithmetic. So old world calendars, they have this property which is very unusual because it mimics modern day computer systems. Anybody who has worked with Microsoft systems knows that it has an embedded calendar within it that helps it structure data forward and backward in time. That calendar in Microsoft Excel system goes back to 1901 and stops. But from 1901 all the way till now and up into the future, these Microsoft computer programs are all operating on this exact same embedded clock that's in the program. It's just like the most ancient calendars in the world. They were all day count systems. They were all predicated on diurnal mathematics. Every one of them. And what's really unusual, what we've shown in our case, is that the most ancient calendars weren't even focused on anything that happened in the ancient world. They were all obsessing about what was going to happen thousands of years in the future. They are day count diurnal systems. Thousands of years later, when we're putting together the original cliche Zapotec, Olmec, and Mayan calendars, the original Vedic calendars, once didn't deal with years, they dealt with days. The original Sumerian sexagesimal system, and its decimal overlays from a totally different invading culture. When we put all this back together, ex post facto, thousands of years after they were implemented, we realize we're dealing with hyper sophistication. We're dealing with what appears to have originated as a computer template or some type of algorithm by which to measure through time and space to coordinates in the future, which only translate later as a day count system that the rotation of the day and the night. But we've never figured out why it was so important to them thousands of years ago to so meticulously record a single day in the future. If you think this is hyperbole, you need to read my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, from 2011, where I show you that the 1,872,000 days of the Mayan long count divided in 13 Mayan epics called Bactuans were 144,000 days each. system was only a day count system, and it was predicated on a 360-day year, and it was started in 3113 BC, and it never ended in 2012. My book was all about that. That the Mayan long count does not end in 2012. All you guys talking about just publishing books and before 2012, trying to get the public to be scared that something was going to happen in 2012. What I was talking about. Nobody read my book, but it was published in 2011. It was written in 2009, and then nothing happened in 2012 except 2013, just like I predicted, because we got the arithmetic wrong. The Mayan long count ends in 2046. 2046 happens to be the next appearance of the Nemesis X convergence field. 2046 happens to be year one of a whole new orbital chronology, according to engineer David Davidson, who studied the Great Pyramid in the 1920s and published a huge book, and concluded in that book that for some reason the Great Pyramid records a geometrical timeline of perihelion, meaning our sky is going to significantly change after the end of the pyramid timeline. And he published, and I've showed this many times on my channel, that the final year of the pyramid timeline attached to the stellosphere is 2045. You guys know Douglas Vogt of the Dihole Foundation also predicts pole shift 2046. You also know from my research that the date index discovered by French scholar Mario Reading shows that 2046 is a massive destruction date as well in the quatrains of Nostradamus, in the centuries. We have 2046 appearing over and over and over. It's amazing. But that's not the subject matter of this video. That is going to be an epic convergence field. And what I'm telling you is that if you're a first principle soul, you're not going to like what happens in May of 2040 when the Phoenix plane intersects with the Terrasphere. You're sure as hell not going to like 6.5 years later when a bunch of souls are given a second chance to make their exits because they missed the boat on the Phoenix convergence field. It's an exodus point. Nemesis convergence field is like a second chance. Hey guys, give you one more. Here's another chance right here. If you didn't wake up in May of 2040, here it is, November 2046. It's another time to catch the bus. If you're a first principle soul, you're definitely not going to like those 2 days, and you are certainly not going to like 2052 with the return of the dark satellite, because first principle souls will be under the reign of the 7 kings that return in 2052, and that is not a convergence field. That's an exodus point. That's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy for all those souls who believe they're in a soul trap. Anyway, isometric, isolinear, repetitive timelines, cross-political parallels, palindromic sequencing, these repetitive timelines, they're all evidence that we're living inside a mathematical structure. This is not over-predictive. This isn't me just throwing a bunch of things that sound really, really interesting. My arcades veterans, those who have been watching me for years, know I have already demonstrated these ad nauseum. To demonstrate one of each is all the proof we need that we're living in a construct. But I have demonstrated hundreds. You do not live in the world that you've been taught that you live in. History in the collective is just a fixed field. It's just a fixed field that they have believed is programming. It's a series of feedback loops, dungeon programming that keeps first principle souls from making any deep discoveries about themselves. This is what our controllers do. This is what the establishment is for. The establishment can never control the highly individualized soul, the free-thinking individual. It just can't control it. But it can control first principle souls, and it does. It's first principle souls that you come into contact with in chat sections all the time that just they get triggered, they just fire off on you when you just said something spiritual, or when you made an observation about something that is very obvious to you that something is artificially fake, but you get this rebuttal that is just toxic. These are first principle souls. They cannot deal with any information that shatters their paradigm because they wear their paradigm like armor. It's terrible. I would never want to be one of these souls ever. So there's many other clinical systems that I've shown, like the immune nervous system, which couldn't be possible, but it is. We have all the historical references to it. We have the archaeology, and I've shown it all. There was a period in our world when a 600-year period was venerated by civilizations all over the world. And I've shown this. There's a lot of information about it, even though establishment historians will tell you there's no evidence. Remember, I cited those sources in a video about a year ago. There's no evidence of any that the ancients ever believed in a 600-year period. So I spent the whole video just going through citations of all the civilizations that had a 600-year period. Some of them, like the Sumerians, had a holy period that's 216,000 days. What? 216,000 days? Divide that. Just divide that by 360. The ancient Sumerian year. When you got 600. Over and over and over. It's just like Graham Hancock telling you in his bibliography, where he cited himself. There's no evidence that the ancient Egyptians ever factored a year as 30 days. Ever. He said that so matter of factly, and yet I have a plethora of data showing from his own bibliography he's a liar. He didn't make a mistake. I'm not saying Graham Hancock made a mistake. I'm calling him a liar. Out of his own bibliography, he cites all the ancient historians who say the Egyptians counted it a year as 30 days. So he had to put that in his bibliography because he knew in the body of the text of his book he was lying. So he had to refer to himself. You don't ever refer to yourself in a bibliography. A bibliography is to show source materials. You don't put a number on a text, and then when you look it up, you find out that the author is referring to himself. Ridiculous. But that's what he did, and he had to do it because he was passing off inception. So when it comes to the Phoenix chronology, we have 59 centuries of data. Same thing with the Nemesis X chronology, 792 years. We have 59 centuries of data. And the more that the free thinking soul researches history, the more of the collective baggage falls away. In our case, we just did a simple cursory glance at history. Today, first principle souls are saturated with the Jewish calendar. It's the Hebrew year, it's the Jewish calendar. We know this because we practice 7 festivals a year. These festivals go back, and festivals do go back 2,000 years. But the real penetrating researching soul will quickly find out that the whole Jewish calendar phenomenon was invented 450 years ago. And I've shown this in our case. And then many things begin to collapse. Many things that we believed were super ancient were actually of modern provenance. And then we find out true mysteries. True mysteries such as after discovering that the Phoenix phenomenon and the fine structure constant are basically two facets of the same gem, then we find out, wow, there are tens of thousands of reports and published books about the Great Pyramid of Egypt. But until our chance showed it in some videos, not one of these books has ever shown that all the rectilinear measurements inside the pyramid are divisible by 138. Why? Because all pyramid researchers up until the present were first principle souls, or they had fallen for first principle soul collective information. That's why. So we can't fault first principle souls for their ignorance, nor are you really going to wake them up. What you're going to do, what you're going to do by communicating actual things that are axiomatic, communicating truths, you're going to educate souls that are already in various stages of waking up. We're not all in the same stage. Some of us are still in the cocoon. Others have already chewed through the end of the cocoon, but we can't get our wings out. Some of us are almost all the way out. We found out our asses were a little too fat to pop all the way out of the cocoon. We may need a little help. Some of us have popped all the way out of the cocoon, and we're still trying to figure out how the hell to flap these things so we can fly. We're all in various stages of development. That's the true value of not being a first principle soul, and that we can recognize others who are in different advanced and remedial stages of waking up, and that we can share information, and that we can have this community of souls helping each other, not in competition, but in the spirit of divulging what information and what practices and what things we can set to be true. And this is what further separates our community and other awakening communities with the first principle collective souls that are trapped in feedback loops of dungeon programming in belief systems that only perpetuate the very belief itself and therefore form a trap. So these psyops that are ongoing and that we're always calling out, we're guilty of it. Oh, that's a psyop. Oh, man, it's bullshit. This guy here's supposed to work. I'm super guilty of that. But the truth be told, the psyops are a necessary part of the constructural program because they reinforce the collective feedback loops. Now, Ancient Aliens is a psyop. We know it because it reinforces the NASA psyop. The NASA psyop is necessary so people who are first principle souls won't shake themselves out of that and realize, oh shit, I must be something else other than just a human. Because that type of thought leads to maybe I am more than I suppose myself to be. And then that leads to, okay, well, if that's the case, well, who am I? If the world is full of both good and evil, and yet I'm doing pretty good, who's looking out for me? I should have been dead here. What's going on? And this leads to, oh wow, I must be cared for, therefore I must be of value. And this is going to lead to a further logic train. It's going to cause a soul to fully break free from the arithmetic and start writing its own code. And this is what the construct is not trying to promote. At least something in the construct. I call it AIX, Artificial Intelligence X, is trying to keep you from that awakening process. It is Artificial Intelligence X that writes the code for all the psyops. NASA was a psyop. Ancient Aliens is a psyop. Anunnaki from space is a psyop. Galactic Federation is another reinforcement psyop. Gaia, a whole bunch of Gaia across the board. There's value in Gaia on some of the spiritual stuff, but when you mix value and drifting so much that you take even the good, yeah, you gotta call it all. You gotta call it all. So yeah, Gaia is full of Galactic Federation alien psyop stuff. So why would you pay attention to anything spiritual they have to say? This is my criticism of people like Greg Braden, of Randall Carlson. Why would I listen to anything spiritual you have to say when you tried to force this on me and this on me and this on me? No, no, I'm not going to cherry pick what you tell me in order to accept value from you. No, man, absolutely not. If there's 3 things you're deceiving me about out of 10 things you're telling me, then I'm throwing it all out. You got to go. And that's how I feel. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm telling you that's how I deal with people. So Prester John, huge psyop, trying to get the whole Crusades was psyop to steal the wealth out of white Europeans, and the church and state conspired to do that with a huge segment of Jewish merchants. So yes, the Shroud of Turin is a psyop because it's perpetuating a fiction. Now, whether Jesus was real or imagined, it doesn't even matter. The Turin shroud has nothing to do with the time period. It is literally the 11th or 12th century at the oldest. So it's a psyop that reinforces a dungeon program. What is a dungeon program? Every single religion, religio, two Latin words meaning to rebind or redungeon. That's the word religion. So the Delphic Oracle, the Oracle of Dodona, the Oracle of Didymus, all the oracles, Oracle of Olympus, they're all the oracles. We're told about the symbols. We're told about all this amazing stuff. But in reality, it was all a psyop. It was one of the most sophisticated intelligence networks in the world. I've got videos that explain how they did it, how they can predict the future, how they can give you the right answers to things, and it's awesome. It's awesome how they did it. I fully explain it in my videos. I don't even remember which videos. There's two different videos I did on the oracles, on the ancient Greek oracles, and how they were actually intelligence agencies. Maybe my moms can find them. I can't remember. They can post a link and find them. That's what happens when you have 1,030 videos and hundreds of other videos done for other platforms and hundreds of podcasts. You forget what you release and where it can be found. So it's psyops where we find the whole NASA spacewalk deal. This is Randall Carlson's forte. He's real big. He's real big on perpetuating first principle soul material, such as craters. Now, you know from your case research, all these craters, just like the Rishak structure in Sahara, these are domes, or they're areas where when that land was underwater, immense amount of pressure exploded from the seabed and left that crater. That's why it's foamed out so perfectly. Water did it. It's outgassing. The Rishak structure is it's a whole series. The reason it's concentric rings is because it's a whole series of submarine salt domes that collapse. And those areas are no longer underwater. But all of these craters, that's what they are. They're not from rocks from space. But your uniformitarians, your Randall Carlsons of the world are going to tell you rocks from space made all these giant holes. Now, man, there are craters like in Australia and Canada that are so big that the entire world would have been destroyed if a rock ever hit us that size. Oh, no, we've been lied to on such foundational, fundamental things. It's the psyops. Psyops like Atlantis is 9,600 BC. It keeps two things from you. One, accurately using ancient calendrical reference systems in order to accurately date things. And two, it puts a fantasy world so far in the past that it ignores the real things you should be educated about. You should know about the vapor canopy cycle, not ice age bullshit. You need to know about the vapor canopy volcano cycle. You need to know about the Phoenix phenomenon. You need to know about gamma ray field saturations that occur with Nemesis X. You need to know how species are really changed. And it's in an instant. It has nothing to do with natural selection. You need to know the true history of the world, how and why titans and giants really did exist, and that residual architecture in bones and DNA has been found of humans of titanic proportions and why they don't exist today. You don't need to fall for the BS of angels having sex with human women to produce giants. This is a Jewish fiction imposed over the template of the past. Because in the past, before the Jews rewrote all this stuff to blame angels, that wasn't the case at all. Humans were gigantic, titanic, and because of the cataclysm, all of a sudden their sons and daughters were small. The Titans didn't change their size, but no more Titans were being born because of ecological differences. You need to learn. It's the psyops that keep you from learning the accurate history of the world. Ice Age is a psyop, 100%. If Ice Ages actually occur, then we're in one now. How do we know? Because we've got 500-year-old maps, at least 4 of them that show Antarctica free of ice. How's that possible? Well, Graham Hancock, who's going to psyop you into believing that there's been copies and 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 copies that go back before Sumerian times, 4000 BC, of copies and copies and copies and copies and copies and copies that go back before Göbekli Tepe in 8000 BC, of copies and copies and copies and copies and copies and copies that go back before Atlantis in 9600 BC, of copies and copies and copies and copies and copies and copies and copies that go back to the Younger Dryas impact when rock fell from space and into the Ice Age and caused the Great Flood from meltwater plus 1 D. That's Graham Hancock's nonsense right there. Copies and copies and copies and copies, these maps 500 years ago showing where the mountains are, where the valleys are, where the tributaries, where the rivers are, and exactly how the coasts of Antarctica look like, even though there's 1.5 to 2 miles of high ice today. There are copies and copies and copies and copies, even before we were making copies of things with stone, called cuneiform, and called lithographic text. It is absolutely ridiculous that anyone, I don't blame Graham Hancock, I blame dumbass, stupid humanity for even believing that poppycock. It just defies the imagination. But then again, we're talking about first principle souls. They fall for everyone. Now, see, what else I was going to talk about? Hour and 20 minutes? Excuse me. So what you don't learn, because of all these masters of psyops, you don't learn about the Gihon flood and what it really means to human civilization. If you were to research the Gihon flood and turn it into a part of the syllabus, you would learn all about Nemesis. That's why it's not taught. Well, we can't have them looking into the Gihon flood because we're going to learn about this Nemesis object and what it really does. Oh yeah, we can't let them know about the Gihon flood because we're going to find out all these ancient calendars, what they really mean and how you factor them in what they prove to us today. Now we can't have them look at the Gihon flood. Okay, what about the great Typhon flood of Noah? Let's tell them that the flood of Noah was actually in the Younger Dryas period. It's called meltwater plus 1 B, and we'll attach it to Atlantis, and we just will tell them that the ancient Egyptians informed everybody. There's over 20 writers that all tell you that the Egyptians know this, that they factor in years 30 days. Even though Graham Hancock tells you that they did. But let's tell them that the flood of Noah, the biblical flood, was Atlantis sinking in 9000 BC. Let's marry those two things, put them way back there. Because they don't want you to really know what happened in 2239 BC, because that matches very interesting scientific data about a worldwide cataclysm that happened in the 21st century BC, and a Sumerian world disk that actually tells the story of what happened at that date. We can't tell them about it. We can't let them know. Can't have that. Okay, well, we're going to put the